we have Ryan Sapinoso from the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families, and Nikhil Jain from Adobe, who will talk about their project on improving communications and engagement with San Francisco youth and their families. Ryan, Nikhil, turning it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane. Hi, everyone. So, as you just heard from Jane, the main goal of our project was effectively communicating these services to families that DCYF works with. But as part of our project, we also wanted to see how we could bring together data, technology, and internal processes within DCYF to make the organization more digitally mature. So that's kind of what we're talking about here when we say advancing digital maturity. It's bringing together these different aspects to make sure that as we go forward, all of the outreach, all of the data strategy that we conduct is improved upon, iterated, and creates a robust feedback loop where families are really involved in improving the next outreach they receive. So with that in mind, just quickly introducing the team. So from the Adobe side, we had Karina, Jacob, Isabel, and myself representing 4 different teams and really different ways of thinking. And I'll pass it over to Ryan to introduce the DCYF side.
Thanks, Nikhil. Ryan Sapinosi here from DCYF, part of the project team with Sarah and Dory from our data eval and communications teams. And yeah, just before Nikhil digs deeper into our project journey, just some quick working context or background on DCYF I think would help. Yeah, about DCYF, on an annual basis, we grant about $150 million to around 400 programs housed under roughly 150 CBOs citywide. It is a pretty significant allocation of resources, and we're intent on making sure that the services we fund effectively support the city's highest need communities. So when we're talking about digital maturity and advancing that at DCYF, our intent really is to strengthen our ability to align grant making with the voices of parents and young folks who can easily go unheard and without civic engagement in public agencies. So DCYF was really excited to partner with Adobe for the Civic Bridge project to reflect and strategize around deepening our digital engagement, especially as we're embarking on a new planning process for the next cycle. And also because digital engagement is really the biggest option available to us given the context of the current pandemic. So that said, back to Nikhil.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. So summarizing a lot of what Ryan shared, we've put together the objectives at the top of the slide here around awareness and engagement, reaching the most in-need populations, and also developing this feedback loop. And we understood these objectives to translate into specific digital priorities around consolidating profiles for each family, such that when we send outreach, whether it's email, text, or in other forms, it's actually tailored to their specific needs, whether that's neighborhood, age of their kids, what they're looking for, etc. But also internally, it's about having a data-driven organization where all of these metrics are tied to clear success factors that we'll dive a little deeper into. So briefly just flashing the timeline, it was over 16 weeks, and we took an iterative approach where using our weekly check-ins, we managed to iterate on each deliverable until it was as relevant as possible to DCYF. We did include some key learnings from our team here. So Karina and Isabel noticed that these problems are obviously very complex and challenging. If they weren't, they would have been solved already. And so it really was worth, taking that extra time to understand the problem before diving into design. So specifically looking at the community needs assessment, which is the planning process that Ryan spoke to, we took the sample persona of Marcia, who goes through a series of steps where she's learning about DCYF, she's sharing information in the form of a survey. But because there's not necessarily a clear outreach strategy at the moment, there may be gaps in this overall outreach. So she may not receive a follow-up. And if she returns to DCYF, there may be no way to recognize that this is the same family with the same needs coming back. So with that in mind, we put together what we see as a future journey for the same persona across the same set of stages, except that there's a couple of key differences here. So for instance, the emails, the text messages she receives are a lot more tailored to her need. It's based on the neighborhood she lives in, it's based on the age of her kids, and there's various other capabilities highlighted at the bottom of the slide that we won't go into detail into, but the technical implementation is also where Adobe was guiding the process. That said, one of the learnings here was that the procurement process for new technology can sometimes be a real roadblock, maybe particularly in government, but in other industries as well. So sometimes the best solution is looking at an existing process and learning how to streamline it. With all this in mind, we also did want to make sure that we're not just offering technical guidance, but actually putting into place a framework for what digital maturity looks like so that DCYF can continue returning to these metrics and see how they're tracking against progress. So this is a unique Adobe framework that looks at people, process, and technology. And we had DCYF rank themselves. So 15 stakeholders took a survey, ranking the organization on a scale of 1 to 5 across these 12 metrics. And you see DCYF in red, we see the industry benchmark in gray. And we learned here that in a lot of these areas, DCYF is on par or even ahead. And one of the key learnings on my part was that as we adjust it for each industry, we want to make sure we're dropping buzzwords and making it as relevant as possible. We did want to make sure that rather than just leaving 12 metrics to sort of work with, we actually prioritize them on a scale of impact on the organization against effort to transform. So specifically looking at the quick wins, looking at how someone like Marcia can have clear next steps defined for her on the back end so that when we send follow-up emails and other messaging, there's a clear set of what comes next and how do we guide her to it. With that in mind, I'll pass it back to Ryan to quickly share how these different use cases and metrics will be in effect in a crawl, walk, run for DCYF.
Thanks, Miguel. So yeah, going through that matrix, it really provided DCYF with an ability to plan forward. I think we would start with crawling and system internal conversations. So, defining the user journey is definitely a place for us as DCYF staff to initiate conversations on, with a journey that Adobe's proposed, is this something we want to refine? Is this something we're going to adapt? There's some internal reflection that needs to be had, so we can really think of strengthening our ability to treat members of the public less as single points in time snapshots of input for our plans, and more ongoing partners for our planning and grant making. Alongside that, there would be the ability to walk into technical solutions. Adobe's been working through refinements for a data stakeholder engagement platform, Civic Engage, that would allow us to really clean up a bunch of our digital needs. So that would help us clarify analytics visibility, collect actual information, helpful for communications campaigns. So with that technical solution in place, we can then run into new pieces like marketing toolkits and better digital insights for, again, continuously improving our outreach efforts. Yeah, so I think that's it. Thank you again to Adobe and team for the solid just listening and exploration and insights you're equipping us with, and thank you again to everybody online with us for just tuning into our work.
Thank you all.